Hi everybody, this is Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the June My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. For this layout, I'm using this really beautiful paper from 49 and Market that was in the kit. And I wanted the edges of the layout to be distressed, so I am using my ruler and I'm tearing away approximately ½ an inch from each side of the paper. I think that this torn edge will give the layout a lot of character. I'm using a regular straight metal ruler that I have on my work table. I know that there are rulers that are made especially for creating a jagged edge by tearing, but this ruler worked just as well. I think I got the nice rough distressed edge that I was looking for. Behind the paper that I just tore, I have another pattern paper from the kit. I created a background on this paper and I really wasn't too crazy about it, so I decided to repurpose this piece of paper. It's going to be the border all the way around the edge of the paper. I will gut the center and then I'll be able to use the center on another part of the layout as well. Sometimes that will happen. I'll make a background and I really am not too crazy about it, but I feel like even at the risk of ruining a piece of pattern paper, you have to take chances, you have to try new things. And luckily, with this piece of paper, I was able to repurpose it, and I actually get a lot of use out of it on this layout. I have that piece of brown background paper gutted. I'm now using some Distress ink in Vintage Photo to ink up all of those torn edges. And now I'm attaching those two pieces of paper together using some ATG adhesive. I didn't put the adhesive right up to the edge of the torn paper because I wanted to be able to distress the edges a little bit more. Usually I forget to do that, but this time I remembered. I just put it back a little bit, just enough to give me some leeway that if I wanted to bend the paper up a little bit more, I would be able to. So I went through the papers and the embellishments and I picked out a lot of neutral embellishments, and I also picked out some that had yellow on them. This layout is going to be mainly yellow, brown, and then have a couple of pops of the beautiful blue color that's in some of the flowers that I'll be showing you in a little while. And once again, I'm inking the edges of all of these pieces with the Distress ink in Vintage Photo. I don't know what it is about Vintage Photo, but it just goes with so many different paper collections. If I could only have one ink pad, it would be a Distress ink in Vintage Photo. It is very versatile and it comes in really handy. I mounted my photo behind this frame. This is one of the embellishments from the kit. I don't end up using this photo. I found another photo that I thought went a little bit better, not only with the colors on the layout, but also with this window frame. I don't switch the photo out just yet. I do that later when I started to not really like the way the photo looked in the frame. Instead, I took the embellishments that I had and I began to layer them all around the photo cluster. I have that really cool die cut of the fence underneath the photo. I have a tag over the photo. That large yellow piece is an envelope. I love the color of that, so I put that right behind the photo. Then there was a smaller, thinner tag. I decided to put that up at the top near the larger tag. There was another embellishment that had a really cool edge on two sides of it. It has little holes punched out and the edge almost looks like a stamp. So I cut that in half and I have one half on the left-hand side of the photo and one on the right. So I thought this photo went a lot better with the layout. I like the way the photo looks in the frame. It's hard to explain exactly what it is, but I definitely like the way there was a lot of yellow in this photo because the layout is going to have a lot of yellow in it. Overall, it just seemed like a better choice for a photo for this particular layout. I'll make another layout for the other photo. Here I'm using a piece of cardstock from my stash and I'm mounting my photo on the piece of cardstock. I think it gives it a little bit more structure just because I have that photo attached into the frame and I think that it needed a backing. And then I realized that you couldn't see the yellow on either side of the frame, so I decided to cut it down just a bit just so you'd be able to see a little bit of that really beautiful yellow color surrounding the photo. With the frame cut down, I liked the way the photo looked layered on top of that yellow card, so I attached the two together. And then I put a lot of adhesive on the back of the card because now I'm going to attempt to take all of those embellishments that I placed down on the layout and attach them down to my photo in the same spot that I had them. And this can sometimes be a little easier said than done. And that's one of the reasons why I like to use the ATG adhesive. There's some opportunity to reposition things if you don't get them exactly right the first time. I layered a card behind the photo with just a little bit visible at the top, and I didn't want to waste the rest of the embellishment, so I cut off the rest of it, just leaving that little part at the top, and then I'm going to use the rest of the embellishment in a little while. And although some things do get covered up on layouts, I really don't like to waste anything. Now I am sliding that fence embellishment underneath the photo and attaching that down. And then I'm trying to figure out where I could use the rest of that embellishment that I just trimmed off of the back. And I was thinking it might look nice right above the tag. I thought it was a cool frame kind of look, so I attached that down. I liked it right away. And there were a number of these lace pieces. These are from the laser cut pack. And I think that these pieces come in so handy. I decided to remove part of that lace piece. I'm going to use that on another part of the layout in a little while and put the larger piece at the bottom of the photo cluster. Well, I did put a good amount of adhesive on the back of the photo. Some of the pieces weren't attached down quite as well as I wanted them to be, so I decided that I was going to layer a piece of cardstock behind the larger cluster, and that would help to keep all of those pieces in place. I trimmed that piece of cardstock a little bit, and now I'm ready to attach the photo cluster down to the paper. I'm always happy when the kits come with some pre-made titles, and this kit had a number of them. I decided to go with a title that says Love You, and I cut a long yellow label in half. Well, the edge of it is yellow, and I'm going to put a little piece of that label on the top of the sentiment Love You and the rest of it on the bottom, just to give a little bit of extra layering to the title. And I attach that down right in the center of the page underneath the photo cluster. Now I'm going to bring in these really beautiful dimensional flowers. And I was thinking that yellow and this bluish green, almost like mint color, looked really nice together. And I think it definitely gave a little bit of a pop of color to this otherwise monochromatic color scheme that I had on my layout. I used some heavy matte gel medium to attach the flowers down. I found that using regular gel glue works fine, but I think that this particular medium will really hold those flowers down in the long run. I don't have to worry that they're going to fall off. Earlier, to balance the layout out a little bit, I added a small frame in the lower left-hand corner. I placed it there and I took it away and it looked like something was missing, so I decided that it helped to balance out the layout, and so I left it where it was. It looked like there was something missing on the right-hand side of the photo, so I found a little stamp embellishment and I tucked that in there. And then I also added a delicate bow die cut to the large tag at the top of the layout. Usually when I use flower embellishments on pages, I like to include some leaves or branches as well. For this layout, I started off with these branches that I inked with some vintage photo. These are from one of the flower packs. And then I also added in some die cuts. I decided to leave them white. I sometimes will see that scrapbookers will leave some die cut elements white, and I like the way it looks, so I decided to give it a try. And now I'm adding some butterflies to the page. I had a fussy cut butterfly that had a flower attached to it. I put that over the photo. I put a yellow butterfly in the upper left-hand corner. Then I added some daisies to the right-hand side of the page. There was something about that cluster on the top that just didn't look right to me. So I started by peeling off one of the layers of the blue flower that's there. It seemed to me that that cluster would look a little bit better if it was a little bit smaller. So I decided to remove the off-white flower from that cluster. And again, something didn't look quite right. So I thought that I would try to ink the edges of those white die cut branches after all. I didn't add a lot of ink, just a little bit to the edges, just so that there would be a little bit of contrast between the leaves and the background. And then there was a little bit of a messy spot in the top flower cluster, so I added a little die cut flower on top of that area. And something still didn't look quite right to me up there, so I continued to fuss around with that area. And then I did the same thing in the lower right-hand corner. I inked the edges of all those branches with the Distress ink, just so that everything would look the same on the layout. I have some daisies on the right-hand side of the layout, and there's one over the photo, so I thought it made sense to add a couple on the left-hand side of the photo too, so I tucked some behind that fence embellishment. And I like the way those daisies look, so I decided to add a few more to the layout. I don't keep all of them on the page though. And then I added a dragonfly near the title, but I later removed that dragonfly. It just looked like it was a little bit too much, and sometimes I can overdo it, so I ended up saving that for a different layout. Sometimes it's hard to know when to stop adding embellishments, so sometimes I'll add tons and tons of embellishments to the page, and I like the way it looks, and I think that everything works out. And then other times I'll add a lot of embellishments, and later on I'll look at the layout and think that it's a little bit too much. So on this particular layout, I have a lot of embellishments, but I think that I kind of tipped it over the top with some of those flowers that I added and that dragonfly too. So I do end up removing some of those elements later. The frame that I had on the lower left-hand corner was kind of floating around for a while. I had it tucked in there, but I didn't attach it down. So I got that attached down to the page. And then I started editing my layout and removing and moving some items around. And the embellishments that I did decide to keep, I attached down to the page. And then I gave my page a little shake. That's something that I'll sometimes do just to make sure that there's nothing loose on the page, that I have everything attached down where I want it. Well, now you can see that I removed the dragonfly from the bottom, and I have to tell you there was still something about this layout that I really wasn't crazy about, but I decided to push on. So I got out my container of heavy gesso. This is Finnabair white gesso, and I used an old bristle brush, and I started dabbing just a little bit of the gesso on the flowers just to give the petals highlights in a few areas, generally around the edges of them. And then I also added a few dabs of the gesso to the centers of the flowers too. I was having some problems with that blue flower staying down, I think because I moved things around so much up there. So I added a little bit more gel glue. I didn't want to over apply the gesso, so I was dabbing very lightly. I did go over the flowers more than once just to make sure that I had enough on there since I wasn't putting it on too thick. I also added a little bit of the gesso to those branches that I have on the layout to give them some highlights, but then I decided that I didn't want to include those branches on this particular layout. So I concluded that I did not like those white die cut branches. They might look nice on another layout, but for this particular layout, I just didn't like them. So I went in and I removed all of them. I did use wet glue on them, but because I only attached them down at the base underneath the other embellishments, it wasn't too hard to remove them. To replace those branches, I used the same die, and then I used the piece of brownish paper that I had gutted from the center of the paper that I have all around the outside of the layout. And then I die cut out a whole bunch of branches. Then I inked the edges of all of the die cuts with Distress ink, and once again, my favorite, vintage photo. And I began placing them in the same general area that I had the other branches. And I think that this really helped me to like this layout a lot more. I was really not a big fan. And then once I started putting these on the layout, I felt like they helped those floral clusters to look more anchored on the page. And I was feeling a little bit better about the layout. And I know that I've said this before, so I'm sorry if you're hearing it again, but I really think that it helps when you have a layout that isn't quite working out to take a break, walk away, and come back later, and that a lot of things look a little bit clearer and are easier to fix. I had a little piece of lace left over from that large lace die cut, and I wanted to put that along the edge of the torn piece of paper. So I tore a little bit more along the edge, and then I tucked that laser cut lace piece in there, and I think that adds a nice little detail to the edge of the layout. And then I used some gel glue and I went around the layout and attached all of those die cut branches down. And that is the very last touch. This layout is complete. Here are a few close-ups. Thank you so much for watching. I know I say it every time, but I am sincerely grateful for every single view and like, and for all of those lovely comments that you leave me. It makes all of this really worth it. Thank you so much. Please take a look in the description box where you'll find a link to the My Creative Scrapbook website. These kits are truly beautiful, and if you are interested in purchasing a subscription, you can get all the information that you need there. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.